Welcome to Happy Crappy Paints board games. Gloomhaven, Part 2, The Scoundrel. This is how the Scoundrel will look in the end. The most interesting part of this mini is the blade and the green glow. We'll come to that. The paints used are Gorthor Brown, Zandri Dust, Elysian Drab and Rhinox Hide for the most part. For the leather pieces, and for the blade we're going to use White Scar, Elysian Green and Waywatcher Green to get that glow. I decided to use a white primer to make sure that I could see all the details of the mini. I also had quite a few mold lines on the Scoundrel that I had to cut away with a hobby knife. Per usual, we're going to paint most of the mini with a 00 brush. We are going to use a 30 and a 50 for a few of the details, but mostly it's going to be a 00 brush. Starting with the armor on her legs, we're going to use Gorthor Brown for that. What I really think is cool with the Scoundrel is that her armor makes sense. The leather armor on her legs looks like leather straps to make sure that she is nimble and can climb and do acrobatics. At the same time protect against slash or wounds. And also knee pads to protect the knees while climbing and doing burglary activities. The same is true for all of her armor. I really like it. I'm using Zandri Dust as my second color for the leather armor. I'm going to use Zandri Dust for the rest of the pants, the chest armor and the arms. Elysian Drab is the third color that I'm going to use for the leather. I'm going to use it for her skirt or cloth, and also going to use it for some of the more hardened leather armor on her shoulders and arms. As you might have noticed, I mostly paint only one layer of the base coat. This is since I use washes quite liberally, and the washes will cover a lot of the area anyway, and it looks good enough for these speed paints. I envision that the edges or blades on her left armor, on her left arm, is used for parrying and twisting blades out of the hands of the opponents, which is pretty cool. I like these little details on the Scoundrel. I'm not going to paint the purse brown at all, the purse she's holding. I'm going to brown at all. I'm going to use actually White Scar to make it more white, and then use Agrax Earthshade as the only brown tint on top of White Scar. Looks really cool. Looks like a satin purse in the end. So it works out well. Rhinox Hide is the 4th brown shade used on this mini. I use Rhinox Hide for the elbow pads and the knee pads to symbolize that this is the hardest leather pieces on her armor. And I also use Rhinox Hide for all of the little details that are on both the armor and also the swords and the different straps there are. She's holding her gear, like throwing knives and so on, in her armor. For the hair, I'm using Abaddon Black, and then for the highlights of the hair, I'm using Eshin Grey. When painting the hair, use watered Abaddon Black to cheat a little bit on the highlights, so the raised areas of the hair will be a lighter shade of black, just purely because of the white primer showing through underneath. For the skin, we're using Reikland Fleshshade, and we're going to shade that with Reikland Fleshshade later on. This is also a speed painting technique. Normally, when you want to spend a little more time on the minis, the first shade or the first color you paint skin with is the darker skin color, maybe Bugman's Glow or something similar, and then you paint the raised areas with Reikland Fleshshade to bring out the highlights, and then you mix even white with Reikland at the top to bring out the very bright highlights. Ignoring that when speed painting completely, just do Reikland or completely and then just use shading. Now that the black hair is dried, you can do the highlights of the hair with Eshin Grey. Also using Eshin Grey for the sword sheaths. I thought about using Abaddon Black to make them black and then highlight them with grey, but then decided to in the same vein as speeding up the skin color painting, is just use the highlight color and then use the shade to darken it. So for the sword sheaths, I'm going to use Eshin Grey, or I did use Eshin Grey for all of them, and then just use Nuln Oil on top to add some of the detail in the recessed areas afterwards. Here I'm waking up the Zandri Dust color that I have on the wet palette. I actually had a lunch break in between here somewhere while recording, so it actually managed to dry up on me. I used Zandri Dust for all the leather details for the swords. Then I'm going to use Rhinox Hide a little bit later to finish off the rest of the sword handle or handles. And that's what I'm doing here. You can also see soon that I start to, while I'm having paint on the brush, to go over and do small corrections. Whenever I see mistakes I've made, now that all the colors are on the palette, I just rinse out the brush and fix them as I see them, so I don't forget and don't come back and do that later. Using white scar for the purse, and like I mentioned before, and also white scar for the mask and the blade, and also the throwing knives on her left thigh. You can use white scar as the base for the things that are glowing green in the artwork. You can use a similar technique for the Spellweaver in an upcoming video, but in that case it's going to be green. It's not green. It's going to be different shades of blue instead. I'm using Agrax Earthshade for most of the mini. I'm using it quite liberally. I'm not using it to only shade the recessed areas. I'm covering most of the mini with Agrax, and then I'm lifting off where it pulls too heavily by drying the brush against my thumb, like you see I did there, and then touching the tip of the brush lightly in the areas where the wash pulled too heavily, and the brush would then automatically suck up the excess paint. So you can see soon I'm also using Agrax for the purse. Shading the face, I'm going to use Reikland Fleshshade as I mentioned earlier. This is a little tricky to not get any of the Fleshshade on the white mask. If you do, you have to go back and repaint the mask with white scar, because that Reikland Fleshshade will interfere with the green glow later on. Here I'm also going back and adding white scar to the throwing knives. I forgot that, and when I had white scar in the brush earlier. I chose Elysian Green for the main color for the green glow, not because it's any particularly good green, it's because it's the green I had. So I mixed it with white scar to get a lighter shade, and I just mixed it like you see there with some white and some Elysian Green, and then to the shade that I found looked good. Should be quite bright or light, not too dark. Something similar to what I have right there. I decided to paint the green shade at the edge of the sword, or the edges. I didn't really have a plan here. I just tried it out and it happened to look good. I wasn't sure how the green wash later on would smooth out the differences between the different shades of green, but it worked out well. For the mask, I'm using a smaller brush. This is a 3-0 brush, and it is a little tricky to reach the, let's say, left side of the mask, because the hand with the purse is in the way. So you're gonna see shortly that it's really hard to show on camera when I'm painting the left side of the mask. Using a 5-0 brush for some of the details of the eyes. Here I'm using a darker green the recessed areas of the mask. We're going to use Abaddon Black as well to get a little bit of a dab of black as well. Here you can see some of the difficulties of reaching the left side of the eye or the left side of the mask, because the hand with the purse is in the way. At least if you're right-handed, as I am. Here I'm making some corrections with brown around the fingers. I'm not actually adding any green tint to the purse. Kind of looked like that since I had green just previously on the brush. Here I'm going to add highlights to the face after now that the Reikland Fleshshade have dried. So I'm mixing some white into the Kislev flesh and adding a little bit of highlight to the raised portion of the forehead, the nose, the cheekbones and the lips, and then also her neck. And now to the fun part, the green glowy stuff. For that I'm using Waywatcher Green as the glaze. Works as a wash, really, in this regard at least. And painting all of the blade and also a little bit on the glove around the blade, the mask and the throwing knives, and it looked really, really well. Moving on to some of the to do the details on the armor, using Runefang Steel for the throwing stars, the details on the leather straps, the belt buckles, and whatever else that looks to be metallic in the armor. Here I'm working on the leather straps with Rhinox Hide. Once again we're kicking the Zandri Dust color awake, this time for highlighting the leather armor. So I used Zandri Dust for all of the raised portions and edges of the leather armor even the pieces of the armor that was darker than Zandri Dust when I first painted the armor. The last thing we're doing before painting the base is adding Nuln Oil to the Eshin Grey that we have on the mini and the sword sheaths to add some detail to those as well. And after this, all that remains is painting the base black. The Scoundrel was a lot of fun to paint, and it turned out quite well. I'm happy with the end result. Next up is the Spellweaver, and after that, I don't know. We'll see what character we unlock next. Thanks for watching. Bye.